Going to be a short tutorial on how to use the accelerometer on your Android device. So to start, I started a new project. I call it Shaker. So then it created for me a shaker activity.java and an activity shaker.xml. In that activity shaker.xml, I basically created one large text over here that will say, whatever name of the application or something. Then I created three text labels here that says y move, x move, y move, and z move. Three other labels that say 0.0 each one, and then one that says no shake. The point of this is that when you move the accelerometer, detects movements horizontally, vertically, and depth-wise. That is x, y, and z respectively. And these movements are measured in some units, right? And I'm gonna, as we move the phone, I'm gonna change the numbers here according to those movements. And where it says no shake, what I will put is if there's a horizontal shake, I'll put horizontal. If there's a vertical shake, I'll put vertical. If there's a in-depth shake, I'll put depth in there. And if there's a combination, so for example, if you shake it in circles or like going around a sphere, then all three will show up there. That's the idea. Now in the text, this looks like this. It's a relative layout. Let me just make this a little wider here, so then I can go like this. This is a relative layout, very default. I just threw in default text views for all of these things. Now the ones that I'm interested in changing are this 0000 and the no shake. Those are the ones that are going to shake. The other three labels are just there for display. So this is the X move label. This is the Y move label. You can, I'm going slowly so you can copy these things. This text view here is the Z move text view or label. And now we get into the 00s. This label here is that 00, and it's called, whoops, I should have called it differently. It's called, no, it's fine. It's called XVAR text view. Look, ID XVAR text view. That means that on my R, when I refer to this in my Java code, I will refer to it as r.id.xvar text view. That's how I'm going to create a reference to this text view in my code. A very similar thing for my yvar text view, and a similar thing for my zvar text view. And then the no shake, I called it id.shake text view. Okay, that's what it's going to be, and that's all my XML is. Okay, slowly, just so you pause whenever you want. There, and then the relative layout. Now, excuse me, the core thing here is in the shaker activity. And I'm going to go, the first thing that I want to do with the shaker activity is to have it implement sensor event listener. Okay, if I just write implement sensor event listener, and then at the end of listener I push control space, that should import the sensor event listener, so this shouldn't be in red. Okay, so I will just import the sensor event listener. The sensor event listener will have a few methods, okay, that you can go ahead and implement. I will implement them as we go. The next thing that I want to do is to create a few variables here, a few global variables to this class, member variables. First, I'm going to create a sensor manager variable. I just call it sensor manager because I'm not very original with names. Then I create a boolean called initialized. This is just to see whether this is just to see whether the application has been initialized or not. So when it's initialized, I will set all those 0.0s that you saw to the actual units at the moment. And after that, I will do something else. I will detect just the variation. So from one x, y, z coordinate to the next one, what was the variation in terms of units? Because if that variation is smooth, like if you were to move your phone smoothly, the variation from one xyz coordinate to the next one is very tiny because it's moving smoothly, right? However, if you're suddenly in one place and then you move the phone, I don't know, a foot away, okay, that variation from the first, from one movement from one place to the other is so huge that the coordinates vary a lot, right? So what I'm going to try to do is to detect that variation, and if it's greater than a certain tolerance, then I'm going to say that was a shake. Otherwise it was just a smooth movement. Okay. This initialized will actually allow me to detect whether or not the program is initialized and therefore has never been moved, so I can start, positioning the phone. All right, so with that in mind, I create these three variables and then a sensor, my acceleration. So sensor manager actually manages a lot of sensors like temperature sensor, gyroscope, and so on and so forth. And the actual sensor object has all the goodies of a sensor. Then I'm going to create a few other variables, one to see what tolerance I'm going to allow, and then three variables to keep the x, y, and z values before the accelerometer updates them, so I know where it was before and where is it going to be next. After that, in my initialization, my onCreate method, I'm going to create a sensor manager this way with a sensor manager with a getSystemService method. With that sensor manager, I'm going to create an accelerometer, so I'll define my accelerometer as sensor manager.getDefaultSensor. Then this sensor manager, I will register the listener for this sensor manager. So who's going to be listening to events on this sensor? And because I implement the sensor event listener, this actual class is the listener. So I register the listener saying this is the listener, my accel is the accelerometer, and how often I'm going to check for changes in the accelerometer. Well, just delay normal. There's a way in which you can check it a lot faster if you're coding a game and whatnot. And then I'm going to initialize the tolerance, and I'm going to say that this hasn't been initialized yet. Okay. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to override the methods of the sensor listener interface on sensor changed and on accuracy changed. On accuracy change, we're not going to talk about it now, but on sensor change, I will do the following. First, I get a handle onto my text components, right? So the X, Y, Z, and the movement, the shake text views on the XML file. Then I'm going to get where is the sensor now by doing this. If I say that the on-sensor change gets a sensor event, and that event has an array called values where the first three elements are the X, Y, and Z of the sensor. So I'm going to put float X, float Y, and float Z, those variables. Now I should compare it to the previous X, Y, and Z and see whether the movement was big. But the first time it's run, I need to do something special. So if it's not initialized yet, then I'm going to say that the last X, last Y, and last Z are X, Y, and Z right now, and initialize sets to true. Any other time that the sensor senses a movement, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a delta X, which is the subtraction between X and the previous X, Y and the previous Y, Z and the previous Z. And those are my delta X, Y, and Z. Now, if the variation in delta X is greater than the tolerance, for example, then I know that there was a horizontal movement. If the variation in the Y, in delta Y, is greater than the tolerance, then I know that there was a shake on the Y direction vertically, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to code exactly that right now. First, I update the labels with the text, so I set the text of each label with the actual deltas, and then I'll create a little string called move, and if the delta X was greater than tolerance, then the move was horizontal. If the delta Y was greater than the tolerance, the move was vertical, and so on and so forth. If it's all three, then all three will be concatenated and I will set the text of the movement TV, which is this shake text view component. Finally, this takes up a lot of battery. So whenever you get a phone or whenever the application is interrupted, you should deregister the listener, say stop listening. And whenever you resume this activity, you should re-register the listener. So that's what we're going to do now. There are a couple of methods that we override on the activity class: the onResume and the onPause. The onResume, I'll just call the onResume as usual, but then on top of that, I will register this listener again. And the onPause, which is when you answer the phone or you just quit the application, I will say unregister this listener. Because the emulator cannot handle shake events, I will encourage you to try this on your own, but this is all there is. You just then have to hit play and run it. I'll add an image of a phone shaking and how this works, and how this works for you guys to actually be able to see it. All right. So you can see different shakes and their signs.